Hi there, today we're working with Red Heart sachet yarn and we'll be using a 6.5mm hook. That's a K10.5. Now when you get your ball of sachet yarn, there is a center pull in most of them. Some of them don't. And you also have your outside working yarn. I like to work from the outside working yarn because as you work with this yarn, it can get tangled and twisted, and it just, for me, I found it was easier to untwist it working from the outside of the ball as to the center pull. Now, when you get this yarn, it looks like one big chunky strand, but if you take it and open it up, you find this nice mesh. Now, along the bottom, you have this nice little pattern. And then along the top, you have these loops. These little loops here. These are what I call your working loops. We're going to be working in every second loop. Now, I normally do 4 stitches wide because I find with one ball of sachet, this will work up just the like a nice length. That it's not too long and it's not too short. And it'll be a nice full scarf. So what we need to do is we need to find our first working loop that's like a completed working loop. As you can see here, this one's broken. And then we have this one here. So this is our first working loop. And we're going to count over 5. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 working loops. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fold this in behind. So the 6th and the 5th loop line up, and we're going to be working 2 of our first chains through both layers, and our last 2 chains will be worked through 1 layer. So you can go ahead and insert your hook into your first loop, and remember we're skipping a loop each time we do a stitch, so we're going to skip 1, working in our second, we're going to do our first chain by drawing up a loop. Now at this point, people find it helps to put in a stitch marker into that spot. It'll help you keep your stitches, especially if this is your first time working with this yarn. There we go. So that marks your first chain. Now our second chain again is going through both layers. So we skip 1, working in our second loop, insert your hook, and draw up a loop. Now we're going to be working through 1 layer of our yarn. So we're going to skip 1, working in our second loop, draw up a loop. That's our third chain. And we're going to do our 4th chain, which is skip 1, insert hook into your second loop, and draw up your chain. So now we have 4 chains. It really helps to have that stitch marker there so that you can see your stitches. This is 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches wide. Now we're going to turn the work towards us. So the working yarn is in behind our work. We're not going to do a chain to start. We're just going to start working our single crochets. Now your single crochet, make sure you get it in there. This might be a finicky round because you're working through a couple of layers. You have your finished yarn here which might get in your way. Once you get past this round, it gets pretty easy. So again, we're going to start our single crochet here. So skip 1, working in our second loop, draw up your loop. You've got your 2 loops on your hook. Now we're going to skip 1, working in our second loop, and draw it up. That's our first single crochet. Now I'm going to place a stitch marker in there. I don't really need to use the stitch markers now because I have figured out how to work this, but again, it helps with first time people doing this. So that's our first single crochet. Now we're going to do our single crochet, second one. So remember, skip 1, working in your second loop, skip 1, working in your second loop. Now these last two stitches, like I said, they might be a little bit difficult trying to go through those two layers. Skip one, working in your second loop, skip one, working in your second loop for your third single crochet. And then your last one should be a little bit easier if you use your stitch marker, because you can just put it in right beside your stitch marker. Skip one, working in your second loop, drop a loop, finish off your single crochet, and there you go. You have your second round done. With your stitch marker here, you can see your stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to turn it and work another 4 single crochet. Just remember to always skip one working loop whenever you're doing your stitches. So you insert your hook, skip one, working in your second loop, draw up a loop, skip one, insert hook, and draw up a loop for your single crochet. Now, as you continue, your scarf will grow in length, and when you're finished, you're going to be stuck with this unfinished edge in your work. What I recommend doing is taking a matching color of yarn, or sewing thread, and just sew a tiny little knot in order to sew that up in there, and that will hide your unfinished edge. And you can do that at the beginning and the end, because I've seen a lot of these scarves where this is dangling down and it doesn't look very pretty. So that's just a way to tuck it in.